Hey there, ghouls. It's the Creepmas season, and I know this is a very hectic time of year for all of us, but I'd like to invite you to kick back, relax, pour yourself a hot cocoa, and let me read you a story. Every night from now through December 24th, I will read you a chapter from my new holiday creature feature, Christmas Creeps from the Deep. So tune in and hang out with me at 7 p.m. Eastern Time every night for a new chapter. Let's get to it, shall we? Chapter 1: A Christmas Wish for a Big Fish. All Skeeter Snow wanted for Christmas was to catch a really big fish. Like really, really big. He had a brand new smoker in his backyard and the dang thing was empty. It wasn't for lack of trying. Skeeter had been ice fishing every night for the past week, but somehow managed to catch zilch. Zero. Nothing. Not even a bite. He'd never had a run of luck this bad in his whole life. He was starting to think something had scared all the fish out of Holiday Lake. That or he was cursed. Probably cursed the way today's going. He huffed as he slipped off his owl's food and stuff apron and his reindeer headband with the jingle bells between the antlers, the standard Christmas uniform. Skeeter's legs ached from 10 hours of running back and forth between the meat case and sporting goods, covering for Roger Schmidt. He and his no-good brother Ricky had no-call no-showed. The jerks were probably sleeping off a bender in their ice fishing shack. Again. Well, Skeeter was going to give those two a piece of his mind the second he got out there. Of course, he'd have to make it to the time clock first, which wasn't going to be easy. Only 2,000 people lived in Holiday Lake, but every last one of them seemed to be in the store right now, grabbing their last-minute Christmas hams and stocking stuffers. The checkout line snagged up and down every aisle. Register 2 sat dark, unopened thanks to Ricky. Maddie Pickens couldn't keep up, even though she was the fastest cashier in Al's history. She wielded her scanner gun like a Wild West quick draw, ringing whole carts in under 3 minutes, wind blowing through her dyed red feathered hairdo as she went. But even that wasn't fast enough. Not today. Skeeter rushed past her, avoiding eye contact. He hated to leave her in a lurch, but if he was going to have fish for Christmas dinner, he had to go. This was his last chance to catch a big one. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve and the Holiday Lake Christmas Lights Festival, and he was working a double shift. So he stood up straight, furrowed his brows like he was deep in thought, and made a run for the time clock, praying Al didn't pop up out of nowhere and ask him to stay late. Again. He wasn't worried about the customers. Years of retail taught him that if he walked fast and stared at a spot on the far wall like he was in the middle of something important, no one would stop him. Even Granny Boyd let Skeeter walk past, and she always asked him for something. She'd been shopping at Al's for 50 years and still didn't know where to find things. She eyed Skeeter for a second, then turned back to Granny Pickens. The two of them stood at the end of aisle 2. Granny Pickens held a shopping bag over her arm filled to the brim with ammo. Skeeter knew because he'd just sold it to her. She whispered something to Granny Boyd. All Skeeter caught was "just in case," then reached into her bag and handed her a box. Skeeter wondered if grannies everywhere bought as much ammo as they did here, or if it was just a Northwoods thing. He didn't wonder enough to dally, though. He was nearly at the time clock, and he was almost home free. He rounded the aisle 1 end cap and grabbed his time card off the rack. One punch and it was fishing time. One punch and he was free. His day was finally looking up, until Granny Frost rolled over his foot with her wheelchair seconds before his time card hit the puncher. Ow! Skeeter grabbed his foot and squeezed, hoping the pain would go away. It didn't. And worse, he dropped his time card. It fluttered away in slow motion like a cosmic joke. Yep, he was cursed. Quit pouting, Skeeter. No one's working sporting goods and I ain't leaving without my ammo, Granny Frost said. It's the same order every year. 12 gauge, 3 boxes, pick up on December 23rd. You didn't forget, did ya? This is an emergency. Oh, I didn't forget. He didn't, but Roger did. That no-good no-show hadn't filled her order or anyone else's. The pickup shelf behind the counter was empty, and Skeeter didn't have time to do it while he was working 2 stations. But he didn't dare say that to Granny Frost. Rumor was she kept a gun tucked in her wheelchair under that plaid blanket she kept over those skinny sticks she called legs. Grannies. Skeeter wondered if they started out crazy or if they ripened into it with old age, like bad bananas. He also wondered why Al sold them so many bullets. Skeeter was all for gun rights, But Granny Frost alone bought 3 boxes of shells every December, year in and year out like clockwork since before Skeeter was a gleam in his daddy's eye. That was a lot of bullets, and she didn't hunt. Neither did her weird, sad grandson, Earl. He was a full-grown man who rarely left the house. He was what you'd call indoorsy. Skeeter didn't know why she needed so many, but if zombies or communists ever attack Holiday Lake Red Dawn style, Skeeter might need some of that ammo. Best to keep all the grannies on his good side. So he said, "I'll go in back and see if I can find them." He forced a smile and limped off to the stockroom. It was a jumbled mess of boxes, ripped and stacked and restacked like a wonky Jenga tower. Employees had been digging through quickly, looking for whatever weird things customers asked for, then leaving things where they landed. Worse, Bob Thomas had delivered the New Year's Eve firecrackers early, and he was the worst delivery man in the county. He dumped the pallet smack in the middle of the room, where it was impossible to get around. Skeeter couldn't go back out there with nothing, or Granny Frost would have his hide. So he sucked in his gut and scooted past the pallet. Then he lifted and heaved and moved boxes and dug until he unearthed a single box of shells, in a cardboard box so crunched up it looked like an elephant stepped on it. It was all they had. It would have to do. "We got a delivery coming first thing tomorrow." Skeeter's hand shook with fear as he handed Granny Frost that one sad crumpled box. She wasn't the kind of lady you sent home angry and ammoless. "I'm sure there'll be more in the truck." Her eyes narrowed. Skeeter braced for the worst. Every muscle in his body pulled tight. Then she said, "Thanks, Skeeter. I'll have Earl stop in tomorrow to get the other 2. Poor sweet boy hates guns, but he doesn't understand. He doesn't know what's out there." Granny Frost pointed her gnarled stump of a hand at the front window. Skeeter looked, but all he saw was the smiling cartoon snowman painted on the glass. Before he could ask her what she meant, Granny Frost wheeled to the front of the store, cut the line, and smacked 2 fresh bills in Mattie Pickens' hands. The crowd let her cut, because everyone in town was afraid of her. Skeeter shook his head. The Frosts were some weirdos. Granny Frost hated Christmas, and so did Earl. How could anyone grow up in Holiday Lake and hate Christmas? It wasn't natural. Skeeter loved Christmas. He even stopped outside the store for a minute to soak up some of the holiday cheer in the town square before he hopped in his truck. Holiday Lake looked pretty as a postcard, just like one of those snow-capped towns in those Christmas romance movies all the gals around here loved. The smell of fresh gingerbread cookies spilled out of Becky's bakery. Notes of peppermint and hot chocolate mixed in every time the Christmas cafe's door opened. Brand new speakers dotted the town square, filling the air with that bouncy Mariah Carey Christmas song with all the high notes. Skeeter hummed along. This was his favorite time of year, even with the double shifts. And he was never in so much of a hurry that he couldn't stop to smell the sugar plums, so to speak. Life was good. He had a case of Ham's beer in his passenger seat, and his best friend Kenny was already out in the fishing shack dropping lines. The only thing missing was the fish, but that was going to change. He was going to catch some big fish tonight. Big ones, he was sure of it. Nothing could bring him down now. Until some jerk slapped a piece of paper in his face. "What the?" Skeeter held it out to see what it was. Big text screamed, "Beware, the end is near," above a weird scribble that looked like a walking sea creature from an old drive-in movie. Earl Frost, Granny Frost's weird grandson, stood in front of Skeeter with a stack of flyers in his hand. Earl had a white robe pulled tight and lumpy over his heavy winter coat. He looked like a crazed white trash sausage about to split his casing. Only thing missing was a tinfoil hat. "Jesus, Earl, what are you wearing? Look at you." "I'm real glad I ran into you, Skeeter," Earl said. Oh boy. Skeeter braced for whatever was going to pop out of Earl's mouth. It could be anything. He once tried to convince the whole town that Bigfoot and aliens were hanging out in the woods. "Evil fishmen are going to rise up and destroy humanity." Earl grabbed Skeeter's arm, dead serious. "We got to prepare. You're a good guy. I don't want you to die." "I appreciate the thought," Skeeter said, because what else could he say? Earl was a nice guy, but he'd always been gullible. He'd really gone off the rails since he started hanging out with the weirdos down at Bucky's Odds and Ends. Nothing Skeeter said was going to change his mind, although it was Christmas and Skeeter was feeling charitable, so couldn't hurt to try. "Earl, you ever think about getting a new job? I hear they're hiring out at the fracking plant." Skeeter pointed over the water to the other side of the lake. They couldn't see the plant, but the whole town knew it was out there behind the trees. They could see lights at night, and sometimes whatever the hell they were doing out there caused little earthquakes. Have you thought of applying? A job like that would be good for you. Working on a team. You might make some new friends. Better than working alone out there at the gas and stop. Skeeter didn't wait for Earl to answer. Gotta go. I need to get on the lake while the fish are still biting. Skeeter scooted around Earl and stomped toward his truck toward freedom. But Earl called after him. That's what I'm telling you, Skeeter. The fish are biting and they're killers. The great old ones are coming. I sure hope so. I could use some great old ones. Great old walleye, preferably, Skeeter said. He slid into his truck, buckled up, and sped down Main Street. Although Main Street wasn't so much a street as a narrow, winding 2-lane highway that hugged the shoreline of Holiday Lake. The town was on one side, the lake was on the other, and it didn't take long to end up in the middle of nowhere. Holiday Lake was small, a mile-long strip of civilization surrounded by dense forest way up north in the ice-cold middle of Northwoods nowhere, which suited Skeeter just fine, except that night came early in December this far north. By the time Skeeter parked his truck next to Ricky's busted-up Ford, the sun had set and the sky was black as pitch. Skeeter grabbed the case of hams off his passenger seat and slid out of his truck, confident his luck was going to change. He had a secret weapon. He dug in his coat pocket and came out with a fish finder. He bought the last one at Al's, an early gift to himself. Sure, it felt a little like cheating, but this year he needed all the help he could get. And thanks to his employee discount, he could afford the nicer model. He flipped it on and set it so it glowed extra bright and beeped extra loud when the fish were near, then stuck it in his back pocket. He wanted it firing on all cylinders when he pulled it out to show Kenny. Skeeter shuffled across the ice to his shack. None of the lights were on. Even Ricky and Roger's shack, not too far from theirs, were dark. He knew those jerks were still out here. He saw their truck, and there was no way they'd sucked the battery packs dry already. Skeeter had just charged them all. I bet they're sleeping it off, again. Probably woke up and started day drinking, and this is blackout number 2. Skeeter's jaw clenched. He couldn't wait to give those deadbeats a piece of his mind. Skeeter's shack was pitch black and ice cold inside. We've been over this, buddy. You can fire up the heater, take the chill off. Propane tank's full, he said. Why are you sitting here in the dark? We got lights. Skeeter could just make out Kenny's outline sitting in his lawn chair with his chin on his chest, asleep. Skeeter's eyes shot to the pyramid of beer cans they kept by the door. Or rather, the space where the cans should be. They were all gone. Damn it, Kenny. Did you let Roger and Ricky drink all our beer? You know those jerks hung me out to dry today. Which reminds me, I'm going to go rip 'em a new one. Be back in a minute. Skeeter dropped the case of hams by the door. Then he noticed the hole cut in the ice was bigger. Much bigger, with rough, ragged edges. His old radio was face down in the ice, and the milk crate it sat on was upturned. What were you all doing out here, wrecking the place? He sat his radio back on the crate, plugged it in, and turned it on, but nothing happened. No power. Skeeter pounded the wall to rouse Kenny. Wake up, we got fish to catch. He stepped outside. One of Kenny's strings of Christmas lights, the multicolored ones with the extra big bulbs, Al's Black Friday special, Kenny liked to keep things festive, had been yanked clean off the shack. They lay across the ice surrounded by beer cans that had been sliced to ribbons. The battery pack was upturned. Seriously? Look at this mess. Skeeter righted the battery pack and stuck all the plugs back in. The ice lit up red, green, and blue, and his radio came to life spouting Christmas tunes. His fish finder chirped. He pulled the gadget out of his pocket and watched as a big green blob, a school of fish, moved straight toward him. Well, how about that? Hey, Kenny, get ready. The fish are coming. Finally, Skeeter's luck had changed. He slipped the fish finder in his pocket, then followed a trail of garbage. Broken lights, chip bags, and overturned cooler to Roger and Ricky's shack about 30 feet away. There were frozen, sludgy chunks of what looked like mud across the ice. What the hell is all this? You jerks had quite the party, Skeeter said. I hope it was worth it, because you owe me. I'm taking some of your beer and some of the fish you caught today while I was covering for your drunk asses. Skeeter stepped in the door, face hot with rage, ready to collect. He could see their outlines sleeping it off in the dark. Really? Wake up! Chirps rose from Skeeter's pocket, louder and faster. Hear that? The fish are coming. Get up before we miss 'em. But Ricky and Roger didn't stir. Damn it, wake up! Skeeter kicked Ricky's shin, hoping to shock him awake, but Ricky fell out of the chair and landed face down in the ice instead. He didn't even grunt. Jesus, how much did you drink? Skeeter reached down to grab Ricky's shoulder to flip him over. He liked to look a man in the eye when he gave him the what for, but Skeeter stopped short. A dark puddle pooled around Ricky's head, or, if Skeeter was seeing this right, his lack of a head. In the dark, it looked like a jagged edge of raw flesh, like Ricky's head had been ripped off. Not neat, but rough, torn. That couldn't be right. Skeeter's eyes had to be tricking him in the dark. He fished his phone out of his pocket and shined the flashlight on Ricky. Jesus Christ! Skeeter stumbled and fell hard, landing smack on his tailbone, barely missing the fishing hole. Ricky's head had been ripped off. Roger was slumped in the corner. The front of his coat was wet, dark, and ripped to shreds, and inside where Roger's chest should be was nothing but a jagged, bloody hole, oozing guts. Skeeter's heart hit his tonsils until he realized Ricky and Roger were just messing with him. They knew what time he got off work. They knew he'd come right here. They did all this just to scare him, an epic joke, and Kenny was in on it. Why else would they all be sitting out here in the dark? It made sense. Roger had once used a chainsaw to cut a fake arm off Ricky during trick-or-treat. Traumatizing neighborhood kids on Halloween was their favorite hobby, and they were committed. "Ha ha, very funny, you jerk," Skeeter said. "Party's over. Joke's on me. Good work. Now cut it out. It's time to fish." Skeeter stood up. Ricky and Roger didn't. They didn't move at all. "Come on, guys. I said you got me. Real convincing. Don't gloat." He shined the light on Roger. His eyes were open and they were white, dead. And his chest, he stared at it for a good long time, but it didn't move. Roger wasn't breathing. And those guts, they looked awfully real, like something ripped out his inside. Skeeter pressed a finger to Roger's neck. Ice cold. No pulse. His hand shook and his brain buzzed. This was real. They weren't faking. His pocket chirped nonstop. The fish were biting all right, but Skeeter didn't care. He only cared about getting out of here alive before whoever did this to Roger and Ricky came back for him and Kenny. Then it hit him. Oh, God, Kenny! Skeeter shot out of the shack. He sprinted across the ice, but the panic made the ice seem slipperier and made his breath harder to catch. It was the longest 30 feet he'd ever run, but he made it. He clung to the door, breathing hard. "Kenny, someone got Ricky and Roger. We're leaving right now." Skeeter reached for his friend, but tripped. His boot got caught up on a string of Christmas lights. They wrapped around his ankle as he shuffled to his friend. He grabbed Kenny's shoulders and shook. "Come on, we gotta go." Kenny was stiff as a plank. He didn't move. Skeeter shook him again and his head fell off. It hit the ice face up. Kenny's dead white eyes stared up at Skeeter, and then Kenny's coat fell open. He'd been slashed tip to tail, his belly an open wound. Kenny's guts slid out, bubbling down, piling up on top of his own face. No, 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 no. Skeeter's hand shook so hard he could barely get his phone out, let alone dial for help. And suddenly his foot went out from under him and he hit the floor face first. The fish finder fell out of his pocket and skidded across the ice. He rolled over and saw something pulling on the string of Christmas lights around his ankle, something white and scaly. It pulled the lights toward the fishing hole, toward the water. Skeeter didn't know what the hell he was looking at, and the stupid fish finder was beeping so loud he couldn't think straight. So many fish, but Skeeter didn't care. Not anymore. The white thing holding the other end of the lights rose out of the hole. Emphasis on thing. Skeeter had never seen anything like it. It was so white it seemed to glow. It raised a giant hand, 4 fingers and a thumb, but not like a man. They were white, scaly and webbed, with long claws sharp as razors, sharp enough to rip a man's head off or split him tip to tail. Skeeter immediately knew who, or rather what, had killed his best friend. Then a pair of eyes rose out of the water. Giant, bulbous, and white. They were attached to a face so horrible Skeeter went a little mad just looking at it. It looked like one of those monster fish you see on the Nature Channel, the ones that live in eternal darkness in the deepest part of the ocean. Its giant mouth was filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth, long as porcupine quills. The back of its head dripped with tentacles, and they were vibrating. It opened its giant, ugly mouth and clicked. Skeeter froze solid with fear. Then the thing smacked a second huge clawed hand onto the ice and heaved itself up through the hole. It had an eerily man-shaped torso, thick as a linebacker and covered in white scales. It dragged itself to the radio, which was tuned into the oldie station 2 towns over. It clawed at the radio, reducing it to sparking electrical bits, until the music fizzled and went silent. The creature clicked, then waited as if it were listening. Then it grabbed the strand of Christmas lights looped around Skeeter's ankle and started to sink into the hole, into the dark water of Holiday Lake. Skeeter saw his own terrified reflection in those two giant, bulbous, horrible eyes as the thing sunk down, and something in him snapped. This thing had killed his best friend. This thing was a killer. He couldn't let it go. He had to stop it. It had to pay. Skeeter grabbed hold of the light string and yanked. The thing rose up out of the water, just a bit, just enough. Skeeter scrambled to his feet. He looped the light string around the creature's neck like a noose, then pulled as hard as he could. The thing hissed and clawed at him, trying to free itself, but Skeeter held on tight, dodging razor-sharp claws. Then he planted his boot directly in its face. "That's for Kenny, asshole!" The thing stopped moving, stunned for a split second. Then it hissed and clicked and tried to escape down into the water. Skeeter held on to the lights around that thing's neck so tight they cut into his hands. "I don't think so, fish man. We hunt you, not the other way around." He brought his boot down on that thing's head, hard, again and again and again, over and over until its big bulbous eyes bled green. The thing thrashed and pawed, hissing and carrying on. It tried really hard to save itself, but Skeeter stomped his boot down on its face over and over until it was dead. Then he stomped his boot down one more time just to be sure, right between those giant white eyes. He hit it so hard he went ankle deep in fish face. The shack fell silent. Apart from the chirp of the damn fish finder, it beeped loud, constant, like there was a massive school under his feet. Skeeter pulled his boot out of the fish thing's skull and stared at it for a long time, just to be sure it was dead, just to give his brain time to believe what his eyes were seeing. A big, fat, white fish man, with thick scales and a face lined with spiky teeth. And then it hit him. Earl Frost was right. God damn. Skeeter never thought he'd say that, but Earl Frost was right. There were killer fishmen in the lake, and everyone in town needed to know it. They needed to know what killed Kenny and Ricky and Roger. Skeeter fished his phone out of his pocket again. He needed photo evidence because no one was going to believe this. But before he could tap the screen, he hit the ice, hard. All the air went out of him, and his phone skittered away, thunking to a stop by poor dead Kenny's gut-covered head. Skeeter sat up. The creature was sinking down into the water fast, and the light string around Skeeter's ankles pulling him down with it. He grabbed the string and tried to untangle it from his ankle, but it was on there tight. Then something yanked hard. Skeeter flew across the ice. Crunch! Pain shot through him, so intense he vomited. He had one leg in the hole up to the hip, with the joint crunched backward the wrong way. "Rip!" Skeeter screamed. His leg came out of the water. What was left of it? It was a jagged stump, ripped off at the knee. Blood sprayed the ice, spurting with every beat of Skeeter's heart. He grabbed the bleeding stump and squeezed, but the bleeding didn't stop. Thump! Something hit the ice underneath him hard. Cracks spread around him like fault lines. It hit again and again, with so much force the shack shook. Then the ice split and Skeeter plunged into the freezing water. He drew in a long breath and grabbed for anything and everything to keep him from sinking, until claws sunk into his back like hooks, and Skeeter knew that breath had been his last. Something pulled Skeeter down. In the glow of the red and green Christmas lights, Skeeter saw the ice floor of his fishing shack floating in chunks above him, the body of his best friend falling into the water, and then he saw eyes. Dozens of them, white, bulbous, huge. That creature wasn't alone. Dozens of them swam in angry circles around him. Others clawed at the lights, ripping them to shreds, until everything went black. Skeeter was out of air and out of hope, but with the few precious seconds he had left, Skeeter prayed, "Lord, if you can hear me, put lots of bullets on that delivery truck tomorrow, and please give Earl Frost the strength to send these critters back to hell where they belong, just like he said he would. You can't let these monsters ruin Christmas. Amen." Then Skeeter breathed in the icy water. He let it fill his lungs. He didn't fight it. Not that he had a choice. But he let his one precious life leave his body, knowing drowning was a mercy. Because whatever these monsters were going to do to him down here, he didn't want to be alive to see it. All right, ghouls, that's it for tonight. Come back tomorrow for Chapter 2.